She was a young woman who had it all: beauty, a growing fan base, and a life lived online for the world to see. Anastasia Grishman was an OnlyFans model who captured attention with every post, drawing thousands into her world. But the story of her life did not end with the success she built. Instead, it ended with a mystery that shocked a nation. Anastasia was found dead in her own home. The circumstances surrounding her death are unsettling, filled with unanswered questions, conflicting accounts, and secrets that only began to surface after the headlines faded. What really happened to Anastasia Grishman? How did a rising internet star meet such a tragic fate? And why has her case gripped so many, sparking debate and speculation online? Tonight, we will piece together the events leading to her death, examine the evidence, and reveal what the investigation uncovered. This isn't just a story about a tragic loss. It's a story about truth, betrayal, and a life cut far too short. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind the death of Anastasia Grishman. Before the headlines, before the police tape, before the public speculation, there was simply Anastasia. Born and raised in Russia, Anastasia Grishman was like many young women of her generation, digitally fluent, visually creative, and deeply aware of the power that came with building a presence online. She grew up during a time when smartphones were extensions of ourselves, and when social media became not just a tool for connection, but a stage for personal reinvention. From a young age, Anastasia showed an interest in the world of beauty and performance. She loved to model, to pose for the camera, and to transform herself through makeup and fashion. What began as casual self-expression gradually evolved into something more serious. Career. A digital identity. She began posting regularly on platforms like TikTok and Telegram, growing an audience that was drawn not just to her looks, but to her confidence. She had that elusive quality, presence. Her videos were bold, her captions unapologetic. Her persona online was strong, assertive, even playful. But behind the curated content was a young woman trying to turn internet visibility into something sustainable, something that paid the bills. It was through this pursuit that Anastasia eventually turned to OnlyFans, a platform that offered creators a way to monetize their following directly. For Anastasia, it offered financial independence, creative control, and what many in her position sought, a sense of power over her image. She posted adult content under a separate alias, carefully managing what she revealed and what she held back. Her following grew. On Telegram alone, she amassed tens of thousands of subscribers. Her fans described her as edgy, fearless, and funny. She wasn't just selling photos, she was selling a version of herself that felt personal and, in some ways, intimate. But even those closest to her online knew only what she allowed them to see. The Anastasia they followed was confident, constantly updating her content, always present. Which is why, when she suddenly stopped posting, people noticed. And when the silence stretched on, they began to worry. Because the truth was, no one really knew what was happening off camera. In the fast-moving world of content creation, silence can be louder than noise. And in Anastasia Grishman's case, the silence was deafening. In the days leading up to her death, Anastasia was still active online, or at least it appeared that way. Her OnlyFans page remained updated with scheduled posts, giving the impression that everything was normal. On Telegram, she'd been engaging with her followers, answering a few messages and sharing casual clips. Nothing seemed out of place, but something had changed. Subtle, yet real. According to a few close contacts, her responses had become slower, less frequent. Her usually confident tone felt a little withdrawn. There were no alarming statements, no public cries for help. But the energy that once defined her presence had dimmed slightly. She wasn't showing her face as much. Her posts felt more automated, less personal. Friends later recalled that she had canceled plans without much explanation. One friend, who asked not to be identified, said she'd messaged Anastasia 2 days before her disappearance. The reply was short. One word. Busy. That wasn't like her. The last confirmed sighting of Anastasia came from her apartment building in St. Petersburg. Surveillance footage captured her entering the building with a man believed to be her boyfriend. The timestamp placed them together just hours before she went dark online. She was never seen alive again. What followed was unsettling in its quiet. No posts, no updates, no trace of activity on a profile that had been her livelihood. Days passed. Some of her followers began asking questions in comment sections. Where was she? Was she taking a break? Had something happened? The people closest to her began reaching out. Her phone went unanswered. Messages sat unread. It wasn't long before someone contacted the authorities. Those who knew Anastasia personally knew she didn't just vanish. She didn't disappear without a word. And whatever had happened inside that apartment, it had happened quickly and without warning. In hindsight, there were clues. A change in tone. Missed appointments, quiet withdrawals. But by the time anyone realized how unusual it all was, Anastasia Grishman was already gone. And the next chapter of her story was about to begin with a knock at her door. On August 9, 2022, a report was filed with local authorities in St. Petersburg. A young woman had gone silent. Her phone off, her social media inactive. For someone like Anastasia Grishman, whose life was broadcast online, this kind of absence was alarming. It wasn't a break. It was a void. Officers arrived at her apartment later that day, responding to a welfare check requested by someone who hadn't been able to reach her. When police entered the building, there were no immediate signs of forced entry. The front door was locked. The hallway, quiet. But as they stepped inside her small apartment, what they discovered was far from ordinary. The silence inside was heavy. And then they saw it. Anastasia's body was found in the bathtub. She was partially submerged, her body bearing the unmistakable signs of violence. There were multiple stab wounds, at least 6, according to early reports. Defensive injuries were visible on her arms and hands, indicating a struggle. The bathroom itself showed signs of chaos. Items scattered, blood spatter against the white tile. The water, tinged with red, had long gone cold. It was not a peaceful death. Initial assessments placed the time of death several days earlier, likely around August 6th or 7th. She had been lying there, alone, for days. The contrast between the curated beauty of her online image and the grim reality of her final moments was stark. Investigators began documenting the scene, careful not to overlook anything. No note was found, no signs of robbery, just violence. Targeted, deliberate violence. The apartment had only one entrance bar. There were no broken windows, no signs of forced access. It suggested one thing: whoever had done this, she had let them in. Within hours, the crime scene was sealed. Forensics began their work. Outside, neighbors gathered. Some spoke of hearing arguments days before. Others claimed they heard nothing at all. Anastasia had lived a quiet life in the building. She was known, but not well known. Just another face in a city of millions. But that night, her name would fill headlines. Her image, once associated with online fame, was now the face of a murder case. And the question on everyone's mind was the same: who would do this, and why? Inside Anastasia Grishman's apartment, investigators worked methodically. Every inch of the small, single-bedroom unit was treated as potential evidence. The bathroom was the epicenter, the place where her life ended and where the truth perhaps, could still be found. Forensic teams noted the blood patterns first. Spatter on the tiles suggested a violent struggle, likely beginning just outside the bathroom and ending in the tub. The stab wounds told a story of rage. They were not clean or calculated. They were frenzied. Overkill. Whoever had done this had not intended a quick death. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no pried windows. The apartment was locked from the inside. That detail changed the course of the investigation. It told detectives something crucial. Anastasia had either known her killer or had let them in willingly. Time of death was estimated to be 2 to 3 days before her body was found. That placed it around August 6th. Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual, no screams, no crashes, just silence. One neighbor recalled faint music coming from her apartment late one evening, then nothing at all. Surveillance footage from the building offered the next major lead. On August 6th, a man was seen entering the building with Anastasia. They appeared close, comfortable. It wasn't the first time he had been seen there, but it would be the last. What stood out to investigators was what followed. The man was never seen leaving, at least not through the front door. Footage from the rear stairwell showed someone, hood up, head down, leaving the building hours later. The frame was grainy, but police suspected it was the same man. Inside the apartment, there were a few items notably missing. Anastasia's main phone, a small laptop, a set of keys, her OnlyFans login devices, gone. It was a calculated removal, perhaps designed to erase something or someone. A preliminary toxicology report revealed no drugs or alcohol in her system. She hadn't been sedated or impaired. She had been alert, aware, conscious in her final moments. That knowledge weighed heavily on those investigating her death. The killer hadn't just taken her life. They had taken steps to cover their tracks. But with every scene tells a story. And this one was starting to speak. As investigators combed through surveillance footage and pieced together Anastasia's final movements, a single name kept surfacing: Dmitri. He wasn't just another follower, he wasn't a stranger. He was Anastasia Grishman's boyfriend, the man seen entering her apartment just days before her body was found. And now, he was the prime suspect in her murder. Dmitri and Anastasia had reportedly been in a relationship for several months. They met through mutual acquaintances and, according to sources close to Anastasia, their connection had moved quickly. At first, friends described him as charming, attentive, even possessive in subtle ways. Anastasia often brushed off concerns, calling him intense but loving. But behind the scenes, the dynamic was shifting. There were whispers of tension, arguments, moments where Anastasia would pull back from plans or stop responding to messages for hours after being with him. A few close friends said she had confided in them about feeling pressured and monitored. She never explicitly said he hurt her, but the unease was there. No formal reports of abuse were ever filed. No restraining orders. No documented threats. But those who knew her best said the red flags were there, only clearer in hindsight. After her death, Dmitri's behavior became even more suspicious. He vanished. His phone went dark. His social media accounts were deactivated within days. Investigators believe this was a deliberate move, a digital erasure, just like the devices missing from Anastasia's apartment. He had wiped away his presence, trying to stay a step ahead. A warrant was issued for his arrest, shortly after the surveillance footage was reviewed. But Dmitri was already gone, not answering calls, not returning home, not contacting family. Authorities believed he had fled the city. And then came the quiet break in the case. 2 days after the warrant, he was picked up in a nearby region, reportedly hiding in an abandoned building. He offered little resistance. When questioned, he gave short, inconsistent answers. No confession. No clear motive. But the evidence, the footage, the missing items, the locked apartment, all pointed in one direction. The man Anastasia had trusted most may have been the one who ended her life. On August 11, 2022, just 2 days after Anastasia Grishman's body was discovered, Russian authorities made an arrest that confirmed what many had already feared. Dmitry, Anastasia's 24-year-old boyfriend, was located and taken into custody in the Vyborg district of Leningrad Oblast. He had been hiding in an abandoned industrial building, alone and without identification. He did not resist arrest. He did not ask for a lawyer, and he did not deny who he was. But what came next was chilling. During the initial interrogation, Dmitry reportedly confessed to the killing. According to police statements, he claimed the act was not premeditated, but driven by an argument that escalated out of control. He said they had fought about her work, about jealousy, about control. He described grabbing a knife from the kitchen and following her into the bathroom. The details he shared matched the crime scene, the location, the wounds, the timing. He did not express remorse. Prosecutors quickly filed formal charges: premeditated murder, destruction of evidence, and concealment of a body. The charge of premeditation was supported not only by the confession, but by the efforts Dmitry made to hide the crime, removing her phone, her laptop, cleaning up parts of the apartment, and fleeing the area. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Anastasia's fan base, already shaken by the news of her death, flooded social media demanding justice. Her story became a trending topic across Russian platforms. News outlets replayed footage of Dmitry's quiet walk into the courtroom, head down, flanked by officers, eyes empty. The prosecutor described the murder as a brutal and personal act committed with clear intent to silence and control. She argued against bail, citing the suspect's flight risk and the overwhelming evidence of guilt. The judge agreed. Dmitry was ordered to remain in custody pending trial. Court proceedings began with preliminary hearings, though a full trial date had not yet been set. Legal experts speculated the defense would argue diminished capacity or emotional instability. But prosecutors made one thing clear: they were seeking the maximum penalty under Russian law. The legal process was now in motion. But for those who knew Anastasia, and for the thousands who followed her life online, no sentence could undo what had already been done. When the news of Anastasia Grishman's death broke, it sent shockwaves through her digital world. She wasn't just another username. To her fans, she was a familiar presence, someone who made them feel seen, connected. And now, her profile sat still, frozen in time. Posts, once meant to entertain, now looked like echoes from a life cut short. On Telegram, tributes poured in, messages of disbelief, grief, and anger. Her followers, many of whom had been with her since the early days of her career, couldn't make sense of it. "Rest in peace, Queen," one message read. "You didn't deserve this." Others demanded justice, reposting photos of Dmitry alongside headlines, labeling him a monster and a coward. The OnlyFans community responded too. Fellow creators posted tributes, shared safety tips, and began using the hashtag number Justice for Anastasia. Many spoke publicly about the dangers they quietly lived with: obsessive fans, controlling partners, threats behind closed doors. Anastasia's story became more than a tragedy. It became a warning. Conversations began to emerge online about the darker realities facing women in adult industries. Despite the glamorized perception of online fame, creators spoke of isolation, the lack of protection, the blurred lines between personal life and public performance. For some, Anastasia's death hit too close to home. Discussions on domestic violence surged. Advocacy groups in Russia highlighted the case as a painful example of warning signs being missed. and how emotional control can turn physical without warning. Her story fueled debates on mental health, relationship safety, and the way abuse can hide behind a curated Instagram post. Russian media covered the case heavily. Anastasia's image, once tied to her adult content, was now shown beside bold headlines: OnlyFans model murdered by boyfriend, influencer found dead in bathtub. International outlets picked up the story as well, framing it within the broader conversation about online safety for creators, especially women. But through the noise, there was a quiet thread of mourning. Friends who'd known her in real life shared memories that didn't involve followers or clicks. They remembered her laugh, her sarcasm, the way she made people feel comfortable. One wrote, "She was more than a screen. She was real." And that, perhaps, is what stung the most, because now she was gone. And the internet, the very thing that made her visible, had become her memorial. As the case against Dmitry moved forward, investigators and psychologists began examining the why. Why would a young man, seemingly close to Anastasia Grishman, commit such a brutal act? Why would he take the life of someone he claimed to love? The clearest motive, according to those close to the case, pointed to control. Dmitry's behavior had become increasingly possessive in the months leading up to Anastasia's death. Friends described his jealousy as obsessive. He hated her work on OnlyFans, resented the way strangers could access her images, her time, her attention. Some even claimed he believed she should quit. But she didn't. Anastasia was financially independent, building her brand and managing her own content. That independence may have made her even more of a target. Experts suggested that Dmitry likely saw her growing success and the freedom it gave her as a threat to his power in the relationship. For someone already exhibiting controlling tendencies, that dynamic can become dangerous. When manipulation no longer works, some turn to violence. His pattern of behavior aligned with other known warning signs: emotional isolation, mood swings, accusations of infidelity without cause, and frequent checks on her whereabouts. But Anastasia hadn't reported any of this officially, and in many ways, it was invisible to outsiders, masked by curated posts and filtered smiles. This case also reflected a disturbing pattern in modern crimes involving internet figures, especially women in adult or influencer spaces. As more creators monetize their online presence, the lines between personal and professional become blurred. Parasocial relationships form. Intimate boundaries get crossed, not just by fans, but sometimes by those closest to them. The Grishman case mirrored others around the globe, where jealousy and the illusion of ownership over a woman's body or content escalated into tragedy. In many of these stories, the violence comes from someone within the inner circle, not a stranger online, but someone trusted. Anastasia's murder wasn't random. It wasn't senseless. It followed a pattern seen too many times before, a relationship marked by subtle control, emotional dependency, and ultimately fatal violence when the illusion of control was broken. For investigators and advocates, it wasn't just about securing a conviction. It was about understanding how to prevent the next tragedy. In the weeks following her death, the headlines eventually began to fade, but the memory of Anastasia Grishman did not. For many, she became more than the victim of a tragic crime. She became a symbol of a conversation society could no longer ignore. Beyond her OnlyFans content, Anastasia was a complex, creative, and ambitious young woman. Friends described her as fiercely independent, deeply loyal, and surprisingly shy in person. She loved art, music, and long walks through St. Petersburg's quieter streets. Modeling and social media had given her financial freedom, but it had also exposed her to an online world that often blurred the lines between admiration and obsession. Her death forced a broader reckoning with the dangers of online fame, particularly for women navigating digital platforms that monetize intimacy. Anastasia's carefully curated public image had made her appear confident and in control. But behind the scenes, she was facing emotional manipulation, control, and fear. The kind of abuse that doesn't always leave bruises visible to the public. Her story reignited conversations around domestic violence in Russia, a country where protections for victims remain inadequate and emotional abuse is often minimized. Activists used Anastasia's name to call for stronger legislation, better resources, and education around recognizing red flags in relationships, especially for young women who may not know where to turn. And within the OnlyFans and broader influencer community, Anastasia's case hit hard. It opened up dialogue about the vulnerabilities faced by sex workers and digital creators, not only from followers, but from those they trust most. Behind the glamour of photo shoots and content schedules, many influencers shared stories of controlling partners, threats, stalking, and blackmail. Online platforms, too, began facing renewed pressure to provide better safety tools for creators, including anonymous reporting systems, emergency contact protocols, and access to mental health support. Anastasia's name now lives beyond hashtags and headlines. In life, she was a model, an artist, a daughter, and a friend. In death, she became a wake-up call, not just about the dangers of toxic relationships, but about the hidden costs of digital fame. Her story is a reminder that behind every screen is a real person. And sometimes, the most curated lives are the most at risk. Anastasia Grishman was just 26 years old when her life was taken. A rising model, a creator, a daughter, a friend. She built a career in the digital spotlight, balancing creativity with confidence, navigating a world where personal exposure was the currency of success. But behind the followers and filtered images was a young woman struggling with a dangerous relationship, one that would ultimately lead to her violent end. She was found in her apartment, alone, with multiple stab wounds. A brutal crime that investigators say was committed by the man she trusted most, her boyfriend. No forced entry, no random break-in, just betrayal. In the weeks that followed, the truth unraveled. The possessiveness, the jealousy, the control. It was a story that echoed far beyond her inner circle. It became part of a much larger issue, about the risks influencers face, about domestic abuse that hides in silence, and about the urgent need for safety in online and offline relationships. Anastasia's life should never be reduced to a tabloid headline or a viral post. She was more than what she shared online. She was a real person, with dreams, flaws, and fears. And her story matters, so let it matter. If you've been affected by anything in this story, or know someone who may be in danger, don't stay silent. Speak up. Reach out. Help is always closer than you think. Raise awareness. Support victims of abuse. Advocate for safety, online and everywhere else. And remember, thank you for watching. If you found this story important, share it. Let Anastasia's story be a warning and a reason to fight for those who can't.